Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Jaded Blossom has a brand new Valentine release that's available now, and I do have links provided in the description box below. As you can see, they do have a new Gnome add-on die set, and they're also introducing a new die set that'll have add-ons throughout the year, and it is so much fun. The first item is Love Stacked Word Die. This is currently not available, but it is the freebie you'll receive if you purchase at least $60 worth of products, and one of those items needs to be from the new release. The freebie is only available on Tuesday and Wednesday, so January 17th and 18th, and while supplies last. Here's the new Gnome add-on set. This is Sweethearts. We have 2 new hats, 2 new sentiments, and lots of new items for our gnomes to hold. Super cute. The new die set that's being introduced is called Build a Booth Die. This is so much fun. So we have all the different pieces to create a booth, and the main booth piece fits nicely on an A2 size card. So I haven't cut my dies apart yet, but you can see that background piece is the booth. I'll hold this up to an A2 size card. I'll just pop off this bottom piece so you can get a better idea. The set includes garland to decorate your booth. It has the sentiment ticket and 25 cents. Then we have several different boards to add to your booth with that nice etched detail. Jaded Blossom already has one add-on available. This is Valentine add-on, and this set includes the heart garland, the sentiment kisses, several different sizes of hearts, and also some lips. Next up is a stamp set called Kisses for Sale, and this is designed to use with the booth dies. Although you could use this without the booth as well, since there's some great sentiments on there. The sentiments were designed to stamp on this one particular die piece of the booth, but you could also put it on the larger piece. I'll pull out the dies so you can see. So one of the boards doesn't have all that stitch detail. You could stamp the sentiment on there, but the sentiments actually fit perfectly on this smaller stitched rectangle piece. So you could add Kisses for Sale, put the little lips and the 25 cents, and you have a cute little kissing booth. And if you're wondering, the gnomes do work with the booth dies, so you can have them standing behind. Next up is a stamp set called Beary Sweet. We have the stamps and coordinating outline dies. And it looks a little strange on that cover, but you use the 3 images together. So the outline of the bear, there's the solid of the bear, and then some shadows of the bear. Stamp all 3 of those together to create a fun gummy bear. To go along with that set, there is a new sentiment set called Love You Very Much. Now this works with the bears and also the gnomes, or you could have both together. There is a coordinating outline die set, which is always nice to have with sentiment sets. There is a new stencil. This is Lip Stencil. It's one piece, super easy to create a fun background for Valentine's Day. So that's everything that's included in the new January 2023 release. And I do have a few cards to share using the new products. For most of the cards, the pattern paper I'll be using is from Photo Play. This is Cupid's Sweetheart. It is a 12 by 12 size, but I found it still works nicely for cards. For card design number 1, I'm using a card sketch from MFT. This is number 627, and this is a very simple card design. I use this beautiful floral paper for the background. Cut out some narrow strips. These are all 3/8 inches wide. The red and the pink are actually some of the pattern paper, and that mustard yellow gold color is some solid cardstock, but it matches that gold color on the pattern paper. I put some double-sided adhesive tape on the back side, making it a little easier to adhere them in place. I started with that gold cardstock piece, made sure to get it nice and straight. Then I'll add the other pieces right underneath, following the pattern of the gold, pink, and red. I did cut those strips just a little bit wider, wanted to make sure they would all fit. So once they're all adhered down, I'll simply flip over this panel, use my scissors to trim off the extra. For a little bit of separation and detail, I'm adding a Love from Lizzie peel off along the very outside edge of those narrow strips. This is the gold matte color in the pinstripe style. Then I'll layer that piece on some dark red cardstock, put my card front onto a card base, leaving 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. For a sentiment, I'll be using the Love Stacked word die. I cut out the background from some gold mirror cardstock and used the dark red cardstock for the word. I love how all those letters are hooked together, so you don't have to glue down each of the letters of the sentiment. I'll use some glue to adhere those two pieces together. I'll place my acrylic block on top for some added weight. And apparently I didn't leave it long enough, so I did put the block back on top. It takes a little bit longer for everything to adhere when you're using specialty cardstock. Next, I'll flip over the sentiment, add some thin foam dimension on the back side. I will trim down a few of those pieces to make sure I get good coverage. And I'll adhere that sentiment onto a stitch circle die cut that I cut out from some vellum. I'll flip over this piece, put glue just on the back side where the sentiment is, making sure not to go outside the sentiment since the glue will show through on the vellum. Then I'll adhere it in the center of those narrow strips, more on the left side of the card. Using this same dark red cardstock, I'll cut a banner and adhere it in the upper right-hand corner. Then for a final finishing touch, I'm using some Love from Lizzie peel-offs. This is the mini heart style in the gold color. Just put 3 of them around the sentiment. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. For card design number 2, I'll be stamping some of the adorable gummy bears. I have the outline of the bear all set up in my mini MISTI, and I'm using Honeybee Stamps Intense Black ink. I'll remove the piece of cardstock, add it into another mini MISTI. I'm actually using 3 separate mini MISTIs to create this bear. I like to make multiples of my cards, and I find it much easier to own several MISTIs. I have a few mini MISTIs and also a couple of the regular. Once I have my bear all stamped out, I'll use the coordinating die to cut it out. Now I've already stamped a couple others, and I did these a previous day, and you can see how the ink color does lighten as it dries. I will be using a card sketch for inspiration. This is from OWH, it's number 10. So where all of those little tags are, I'll be adding one of the gummy bear images. For the background pattern paper, I selected this fun design with cupcakes and macaroons. I'm adding a solid piece of the mustard gold colored cardstock across the top. For a little bit of shine and contrast, I used a Love from Lizzie peel off on the top and bottom of that strip. This is the ruby red mirror color. I used the widest width for the top, and at the bottom I used the narrowest width. And I also added one of the gold glitter sway peel offs with that fun wavy design. I'll layer this piece on some dark red cardstock, add my card front onto a card base, leaving 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. Now I'll add the 3 gummy bear images, and I've already put some thin foam dimension on the back side. I'll first lay them all out on the panel to get the placement correct. Then I'll start with the middle bear, and add the right and then left bear. And the ink still hasn't dried completely since it is still just slightly darker than the other 2 bears. But once it sits long enough, it'll be that nice light color. The sentiment is from the same set, Your Beary Sweet. I stamped it using some black ink, used the outline die to cut it out, then using that same outline die, I cut out a second piece, layered those 2 together for the red drop shadow. And I did pop it up using some foam dimension. To finish up the card, I'll add some Honeybee Stamps gem stickers. I'll put 3 in the upper left-hand corner and 2 underneath the sentiment on the right side. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. Card design number 3 will be featuring some of the adorable gnomes. The very background is a light pink with white music. For the bottom, I'm using a wood grain pattern paper that's from Honeybee Stamp's Grain and Grunge collection. I'll adhere those two pieces together. Then I'll add a white peel off above the wood grain piece. This is the straight design. Put some ATG tape on the back and add my card front onto a card base. All of my cards in this video are American Standard A2 size, 5.5 inches by 4.25 inches. I've already assembled most of my gnomes. I have a girl and a boy, and they're both wearing the new hats that are included in the Sweethearts Gnome add-on die set. I do have a small piece of foam dimension on the upper area of the feet, but for the rest of the gnome, I'll use some glue to adhere them to the card. I'll adhere the boy down first. Then when I add the girl, I'll make sure to place her so the top of their hats reach together to form a heart. I cut out a small stitched heart using some iridescent cardstock, and I did pop it up with some foam dimension, and I'll adhere that underneath their hats. The girl will be holding the sentiment XO, and I've already assembled it. I did pop it up with some foam dimension. I'll adhere this sentiment down first, then add her hands on both sides. The boy will be holding a lollipop and also a heart balloon, and I've already assembled both of these just to save time on the video. I did pop up the lollipop and the balloon using some foam dimension, and I'll use glue for the stick of the lollipop and the string of the balloon. Then I'll attach both of his hands. For a final finishing touch, I'm using a white gel pen and adding some highlights to both of the gnomes, the XO sentiment, the lollipop, and the heart balloon. So there is my finished card, and I did make two using this design. Jaded Blossom has the cutest gnome dies with tons of add-on sets to accessorize your adorable gnomes. Now moving on to card design number 4. For this card, I'll be assembling the new booth. I cut it out from some sort of a peach orange colored cardstock. It matches the pattern paper, so I thought it would be a fun color to use. For the look and dimension, I'm using the terracotta ink color from Catherine Pooler and putting it along the edge of the boards and also the booth. The small white mat I'm using is a mini stencil mat from Waffle Flower. It's great for adding that little bit of ink to your projects since it cleans beautifully. Now it's time to adhere all of the boards onto the main body of the booth. I'm adding Barely Art glue on the back of each of the boards. And while I'm waiting for the glue to adhere, I'll place an acrylic block on top for some added weight. And I'll just shift that block around as I add the next board. After attaching the final board, I'll set that piece aside and start working on the sentiment. I cut out the sign from some white shimmer cardstock, and the sentiment I used some red glitter cardstock. The letters are fairly small, and to help get that sentiment on nice and straight, after cutting out the letters, I kept them all together, put some tacky tape on the very top to secure them, remove the extra piece of the red glitter cardstock. So now they're all being held together with the tacky tape. I'll put glue on the back side of the letters, then place them onto the stitched rectangle die cut. And I'll let those sit for a bit before I remove the tacky tape. Want to make sure everything adheres down nicely. For the background of the card, I'm using this fun heart pattern paper, and I'll layer it on some red cardstock. Then I'll be popping up my booth using some foam dimension. And this is from scrapbook.com. I have their 1 inch and also their 1/4 inch. And for the sides of the booth, I'm using their thin strip foam dimension since it's the same thickness as the other two. I'll remove the release paper and adhere my booth onto the front of my card, putting it all the way toward the bottom of that panel. Now I'll check and see if my sentiment has all adhered down by removing that tacky tape, and it has. This is an easy way to adhere a sentiment and keep everything evenly spaced. I will be popping up the sign using some thin foam dimension. I'm also adding a pink stitch circle die cut on the right side of the booth. Just adhere that in place. For each of the boards, there are some small holes where it would be nails or screws. It would be easy to add a small piece of silver mirror cardstock on the back side so it has the look of the nails, but I decided to use some peel-offs that I've had in my room for a while. This is the bubble design and it has some small little circles. Unfortunately, this is a retired style of peel-offs, but I'm trying to use up some of my older products, and this style was perfect for the small nails on the boards. I'm using my reverse tweezer since these pieces are super tiny. Once I have all those in place, I'll add my Kisses sentiment to the top of the booth, and I'll also add the lips die cut, and I did pop that up using some foam dimension. I'll just adhere that piece in the center of the circle. Now I'll start working on the heart garland. I cut out the background piece from some white cardstock, and I'm adding all of the red hearts. I'll just adhere that in place using some glue. I'll place my acrylic block on top for that added weight to make sure everything adheres nicely. Next, I'll start working on the little jars, putting 3 hearts inside the jar. I use some white shimmer cardstock for the jar. For the lid, I use some silver mirror cardstock. And all of the hearts, I use the same red cardstock that I use for the background of the card. And I've already assembled the other 2 jars that I'll be adding into my booth. I'll pop those all up using some foam dimension, just making sure to leave the very bottom without the foam dimension since they will sit slightly on top of that board of the booth. Then I'll just adhere those in place. The little jars are so cute. There are so many different items you could fill your jars with. For a little extra detail, I'm using a white gel pen, adding some highlights to all of the hearts and also the booth. A white gel pen is an inexpensive and easy way to add just those little extra details to your card. I've even done it on some ephemera pieces. Then for a final finishing touch, I'm using some Glossy Accents and adding it to all the small hearts inside the jars. Make sure to get good coverage, trying to avoid any little air bubbles. Once it dries, it'll have this beautiful glossy look. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. You can see on this second card all the glossy accents have dried and it has this beautiful shine. Now moving on to card design number 5. I'm using a card sketch for inspiration. This is MFT number 304. The pattern paper is from the same photo play collection. I selected 2 designs, one with all the candy hearts and then just a narrow strip of the diagonal stripes. I'll add both of those onto some dark red cardstock. For a little bit of separation and shine, I'll add a Love from Lizzie peel off between those 2 pieces. This is the ruby red mirror color in the pinstripe style. I used the medium width. Put some ATG tape on the back and add my card front onto a card base. Next, I'll add a stitched oval die cut, and I did use some of the music sheet pattern paper for that. Adhere that to the card using some glue. I've already stamped out the sentiment, Happy Valentine's Day. I'll cut a fishtail on the right and left side. Then on the back side of that sentiment piece, I'll put a small scrap piece of cardstock on the upper portion, and on the lower portion, I'll add some thin foam dimension. Since part of the sentiment is sitting on top of the oval die cut, by adding just that cardstock piece on the upper portion and the foam dimension on the bottom, it'll help keep it nice and level. For images on the card, I cut out several of the fun goodies from the Sweethearts Gnome add-on die set. I have some chocolate kisses, a couple of gummy bears, and 2 lollipops. And I did put foam dimension on the back of all of those. But I will be gluing down the sticks of the lollipop since I didn't want to try to cut super tiny pieces of foam dimension. Super simple design and easy to make multiples for Valentine's Day. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. Now moving on to card design number 6. I really wanted to make sure to use the new stencil. For the booth, I selected one of the wood grain pattern papers from Honeybee Stamp's Green and Grunge collection. Since I went with a nice white color, thought it would be perfect to add the lips stencil design. I'm using the Rouge ink color from Catherine Pooler, adding a very light coat all over that booth. For the background of the card, this is actually pattern paper. It's from Alta New. It's their gel printing soft washes paper pack. I thought this was a great background behind the booth. This card will also feature one of the gnomes. I've already assembled most of him. I don't have his hands, and since he's standing behind the booth, you won't see his feet or shoes, so you don't have to worry about adding those pieces. I have his hat going in front of the top portion of the booth, and I'll glue those two pieces together. I did add a piece of double-sided tape at the bottom of the gnome just to hold him in place while I'm adding all the foam dimension on the back side. I'm using the same scrapbook.com foam dimension that I used on a previous card, and I made sure to put some foam dimension behind the gnome. I need just a couple more pieces for the side of the booth using the thin foam strips. At the bottom of the background of the card, I'm adding a strip of green cardstock. Put some adhesive on the back and add my card front onto a card base. Now I can remove all the release paper on the foam and add my booth onto the card. So that green strip at the bottom of the card is like grass, and then the top is the beautiful sky. It's really nice having pattern paper that looks like I spent all of that time creating the background. I've already stamped and cut out the sentiment, bear hugs and gnome kisses. And I'll adhere that underneath the gnome at a slight angle. Then I can attach his hands so it looks like he's barely holding on to that sign in front of the booth. I do have some foam dimension on the back side of his hand, and I'll use glue just around the fingertips. Next, I'll add the 25-cent sign, and I did cut this out from some purple iridescent cardstock. Just adhere that in place on the right side of the booth. I will place my acrylic block on top for some added weight while the glue adheres. While I was attaching the price, I thought about switching those numbers and making it 52 cents instead of 25 cents, just to be different. But I ended up going with the 25 cents. I have a few other pieces I'll be adding at the bottom of the booth, and these are from some other Jaded Blossom die sets. The grass is from the Tree Stump die set, and the mushrooms are from the Spring Gnome add-on die set. I'll put one of the mushrooms on the left side of the booth. I did put foam dimension behind the top portion of the mushroom and glue on the stem. Then I'll put two of the patches of grass. On the right side of the booth, I'll put the patch of grass down first and then the mushroom on top. Since the sentiment does say bear hugs, I need to add some bears. I cut out 3 of the gummy bears from some pink cardstock, and I'll adhere all of those around my little gnome. Put 2 of them on the left side and 1 on the right. To finish off the card, I'll add a few highlights using a white gel pen. Put some little dots on his hat, his nose, and then a couple little highlights on the bears. So there is my finished card. I love how this one turned out, and I did make 2 using this design. It's so fun that you can add a gnome behind your booth. Although this gnome is probably using a little step stool. If he was actually standing behind the booth, you would only see the top of his hat. For card design 7 and 8, I don't have a process video, but I did make a few more cards using the new booth die, and I wanted to share those with you. This one is so fun. Pink background, a little wooden booth, and for this booth I used the shorter boards just for some variety. I added some dimension to the boards using some brown ink, and this booth is filled with lollipops and treats. The cupcake is from Jaded Blossom's Birthday Gnome add-on die set. For card design number 8, I thought it would be fun to make a black booth. I used some black shimmer cardstock. The background is another Alta New gel printing pattern paper. Isn't that just gorgeous? I used some purple mirror cardstock for the ticket sentiment, and some pink and purple cardstock for the tickets, the stars, and also the bunting for the booth. I also embellished the bunting with some Love from Lizzie mini star peel-offs. This is the silver holographic color. The new Build-A-Booth die set is so fun. I kept making more and more cards. Now here's another look at the 16 cards I made using Jaded Blossom's brand new January 2023 release. It's all about love and Valentines. If you are interested in any of the products I used in this video, I do have links provided in the description box below. I always look forward to Jaded Blossom's new releases, and this one does not disappoint. Not only is there a new Gnome add-on set, but we have the brand new Build a Booth die set with the Valentine add-ons. After I finished all my cards, I realized I only have 2 card designs featuring the Gnomes. I think that's a first for me with Jaded Blossom since they released their Gnome dies. I'll make sure to do more with their next release. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.